Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. The time is now 10 a.m., and we have a great show lined up for you today. According to a study by Fidelity called Millennials and Money, it was revealed that 39% worry about finances and 1 in 4 don't know who to trust when it comes to millennials. We will do a deep dive into the subject of millennials and money with the bloggist Leah Gervais. She is the bloggist of Urban 20-something, and she will be joining us very, very shortly. So please stay tuned. Keep listening. If you are a longtime listener of the show, you know we always use the first few minutes of the show to tell you a little bit about what's going on here locally in the Houston and Gulf Coast region when it comes to financial literacy. Now, I am part of the Houston Money Week Leadership Committee, and you've heard me talk about Houston Money Week for all the way since November to now, and we've been building up for Financial Literacy Month. So we're right here at the end of April, Financial Literacy Month. What we call in Houston Money Week. That's our local representation in Houston and the Gulf Coast region. Different workshops, courses, seminars around financial literacy for low to moderate income, or really just anybody who needs help when it comes to their finances. We kick off Houston Money Week the first week of April, and it goes all through the month of April. We are winding it down. We're right here at the end of Houston Money Week. And so I wanted to just do a little highlight of one of my favorite events that happened this year. I've been participating in Houston Money Week for several years now, and this year we had an event called 100 Teens. Now, we have 100 teens every year in Houston Money Week, but this year they did it just a little bit different. It was hosted at the Federal Reserve. It's the Houston branch of the Dallas Federal Reserve, and they hosted 100 teens here in Houston, where we will bring in teens across the area to talk about financial literacy, to talk about budgeting, to talk about money management skills. This year, we actually had a keynote speaker, and it was Magic Johnson. And so it was a really neat, uplifting experience. He was a great motivational speaker. It was neat to hear him come and share his experience, the hard work that he had to put in to get where he is today. Very uplifting. I know it was uplifting for the teens. It was uplifting for me to be able to hear it. And really nice guy. We got to meet him and see him and talk with him. One of the things that he did that I thought was really neat is when he was doing his talk, he gave away items to the teens. So if they all got tickets for participating, and the first one that they gave away was a jersey that was a Magic Johnson jersey there. Then they gave away an autographed basketball. And I think the Fed and Houston Money Week, we knew that this was part of it. They were going to be giving away these items to the teens as kind of an incentive and a motivator to be engaged with the talk. But he actually surprised everybody, and he had bought a ticket to go to LA for one of the teens. And so one of the teens actually won a trip to LA to be able to sit with him as he did some of his work with the LA Lakers, which he is a partial owner of. And so that was one of my favorite things, because we knew the other things were going to happen, but we didn't necessarily know that he was going to do that. He didn't have to do that. He went out of his way to do that, and it was really, really neat. So to find out more about Houston Money Week and how you can participate if you are here in Houston or in the Gulf Coast region, you can go to www.houstonmoneyweek.org. Even though we were winding it down, if you are a nonprofit organization, if you are a for-profit, if you're a bank and you're looking for community reinvestment credits to be able to go out there and do these types of things, we have a place for you to help out. So check out the website, HoustonMoneyWeek.org, and we will start getting ready for Houston Money Week 2018 very, very shortly. With that, let's go ahead and get our guest on the phone here. Leah, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'll start the show kind of the same way. I'll share your bio with listeners so that they can get to know you just a little bit better. And it says, hey there, my name is Leah Gervais. I am from a small town in Colorado and moved to the Big Apple in 2010 to attend New York University. You're an executive coordinator, or you were executive coordinator at Philanthropy New York, where you get to work on engagement, professional development, and education, philanthropic organizations throughout New York City. And you recently, we'll have to ask you a little bit more about this, because you recently returned from 4 months of volunteering and freelancing in Cambodia. Wow, okay.
That's right.
And then also, and this is one of the main reasons we have you on the show today, is that you have your own blog called Urban 20-something, and that teaches millennials to incorporate their travel, study, work, and volunteer experience into their careers. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of the bio so listeners can get to know you a little bit better?
Sure. So, like my bio said, I'm from Colorado, and I moved to New York to go to NYU. And about a year ago, I started my blog, Urban 20-something, when I was going through sort of a confusing time that I'm sure a lot of millennials go through. I had been accepted into law school, which was sort of my lifelong plan and dream, and it was very exciting, but it was very expensive. And having had that from my undergraduate degree, I was really hesitant to take out more. And so I sort of started my blog to document the very unpaved path I was about to take in declining that option and not really knowing what else I was going to do instead. So I ended up on my blog sort of just a way to have documented what did and didn't work for me and help millennials take bigger risks in general.
So I'm looking at the blog here. It's www.urban20something.com, and a lot of good information on there. One of the things that kind of stood out, and the reason we're having this conversation, is that you have written about how, I'm a financial advisor. You hear a lot of people when it comes to personal finance, they talk about budgets as kind of a cornerstone, but you have a unique approach when it comes to budgets. Could you share that with us?
Yes, so I don't like traditional budgets, and I know that can be an unpopular opinion, but I've sort of figured out a different system that works for me. And I mean, it's a little bit of a budget in its own way, but I basically think that one of the biggest advantages of our generation is the digital era and how much more financial literacy is available to everyone. You know, investing isn't something that's so foreign anymore. And along with that comes ways to automate your savings and automate your investing. And so what I've set up and what has been extremely useful for me is a way to calculate how much I need to save each month. I automate that savings, and then I spend the rest. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about how much I spend on which thing. And I think part of that is because I did take out student loans when I was young and started paying them back while I was in college, and had credit cards when I got my first credit card when I was 18. I was pretty young. So I sort of got into this habit of feeling out how much money I had and how much I could afford at a young age. So I have a good sense of what I can and cannot spend. And so I think because of that, I've been able to just sort of not think about my budget.
Well, I definitely like the idea of automation, because automation is a powerful tool when it comes to, I guess, not just the idea of keeping your finances in order, but also savings. The idea of kind of out of sight, out of mind. If it's something you don't have to think about and it's set up, and not only is it going to save you time, but it's the most painless way to save. That's one of the things that you talk about, as well as learning to save. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I definitely agree. The beauty of automating is that it's painless. You don't have to do anything. I think it really came to me when I started saving for retirement and contributing to my 401k. And, you know, I got out of college and I was like, are you crazy? I can't contribute to my 401k. I have student loans. How am I supposed to also pay money toward both? But then once you start contributing and you realize that you're not even seeing that money, it's so much easier. And so I thought, well, how else can I apply this concept? How else can I automate money into other ways so that I'm not even seeing it? And that's sort of where I've ended up with my savings. And I have sub-savings, so I'm saving for very specific different things in my life, and it's really powerful.
I like that. So the idea of the sub-savings, for people who aren't familiar, I got familiar with that with a book by Mary Hunt. She writes Cheapskate Monthly, which is, that tells you anything about me, I'm extremely frugal. But she came up with the idea of the freedom account, where you have a savings account and you've got the sub-accounts in there. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those sub-savings are for you?
Yeah, so these are a little bit newer to me too. I read about them in a book by Nicole Lapin, Rich Bitch, and it's basically the idea that, we all feel like we can save for some things, but it can get overwhelming to feel like exactly how much you have saved for these bigger things. And so the beauty of sub-savings is you can designate exactly how much you want a percentage or an amount per month to go to a specific thing. So, for instance, I have a very little amount. I think I have $10 or $15 a month that goes every month into an account called technology. So then, if and when I break my iPhone or a new one comes out, it's not like this unexpected huge expense to me that's from my savings when I feel like that money should have been somewhere else. I know that money is for technology. And so it's sort of setting yourself up for a cushion in several different ways so that it's just a lot less stressful. And then, if you have savings for stuff like vacations or splurges or any sort of things that might be a little bit more luxurious, you don't feel guilty when you do spend on them because you know that you have saved your money exactly for that. And I think that that's the key also to savings, is to let yourself splurge every once in a while. You can't really just restrict yourself. But if you do it in this sort of calculated way, you can do it guilt-free.
I love that. That seems very important when people are putting money aside for certain things and get left off your list there. Things like breaking your phone, things you don't necessarily count on.
Right.
But if you have those sub-accounts set up, then it's almost getting in front of the situation. I wanted to pivot just a little bit because you mentioned earlier about after graduating from school when you had the decision on law school and then with the student loans. I'm 43 and I'm still paying on my student loans. So one of the things that you write about on your blog is kind of an expedited student debt loan payoff. I'm definitely curious about that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think about this a lot. I could go on about this forever. So I, just like so many people in my generation, graduated with quite a bit of student debt. I'm lucky that it's not paralyzing me, but it totally sucks, and I don't like it. And I think I just sort of have realized lately that, maybe in the last year or so, as you get out and as you start paying it and you see how much you're paying towards it every month that you could be spending elsewhere, I wanted to do it faster than I was scheduled to, because when you really look at how much you're going to pay in the long run, if you only do it based on the percentage of your income that your provider tells you, it's just the amount you're going to actually be paying can be sometimes 2 times as much as the original amount you took out, and I just really didn't feel comfortable with that. So I kind of got serious and sat down and thought, okay, I need a plan to pay this off faster. So the first thing I did was I upped my monthly payments. So now I put 20% of my income toward my loan payments every month. And then an additional 15% of my income I put into one of these sub-savings accounts called Pay Off My Student Loans. And the reason that I don't put all 35% of that into my loan provider every month is because I do need to have some sort of an emergency savings, and the last thing I would want would be to be going full throttle on my loans and then something happened to me and me to have to take out credit card debt, because that's even worse. So that's the second step. And then I also take any and all money I make from my blog or from freelance writing or from consulting or anything I can make outside of my job and put it directly toward that.
So I love that. A couple of things that you said there that just stuck out. The upping your monthly payment. So that's, you're making up and over the minimum monthly payment. And that's huge. People don't realize that often if they just pay those minimums on the loans or the credit card debts, that they go on forever and the interest only compounds. When you're saving, compound interest is a good thing, but when you're paying credit cards, compound interest can be very, very bad. The other thing you mentioned was your cash reserves, your safety net, your cushion, that if something did happen, that you have that savings to fall back on. And you mentioned that you were funding that with really anything, any freelance writing, the blog. And when we talk about that, you talk about what's called the side hustle. Can you tell us a little bit about that? If you were talking to other 20-somethings out there, tell us a little bit about that, because you've written pretty extensively on that on the blog.
Definitely. I think that this is another one of the huge advantages that millennials have. With the digital era, there's just more ways than ever to make money, extra money outside of your 9-to-5 job. And it's not even just about money. I encourage everyone to sort of have a side hustle or a side project because it also makes you more marketable professionally if you are learning different skills that you might not be able to do during your 9-to-5 job. And it's fun, it's an outlet, and I think it really speaks to our generation. I think people think more of themselves as a brand rather than identifying with the brand that they work for as much. I think that millennials are just resisting the corporate ladder a little bit more. And so if you're sort of making money in different ways, and if you are developing skills in different ways, then you're sort of becoming your own brand and not just falling under whatever company you work for. And when you set yourself up that way, that's when you are going to be able to take more risks, like I did, like quitting my job and going to Asia. And that was not all a picnic, trust me, but you can set yourself up to have a little bit more unconventional stability, both financially and professionally.
I like that. I mean, any generation, the idea of an entrepreneurial spirit, being able to be your own boss, is a neat idea. It gives you more freedom. It helps you unplug from the corporate ladder. But I think your generation, more than any other generation, has the ability to dial work on demand. And so you mentioned the freelance opportunities. There are different, you think about Uber, you think about Postmates, you think about these apps that you're able to do those things. There's Fiverr. There's, the idea of what you used to could do was just consult on the side, and you'd have to get pretty creative there. There's a lot more opportunity there, and I really like that. Now, you mentioned something that I liked as well when you said personal branding or career. You talk about that on the blog. Can you tell us about some of your thoughts on personal branding?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to other ways that millennials and anyone, this really just isn't about the millennial generation. The more you sort of market yourself and make yourself stand out and focus on the talents that you have and deserve to show off, sort of the safer you're going to be, both financially and professionally. You're going to find new ways to make money that way. Opportunities will come to you that way. And you're going to be more employable that way. And it's just easier to do this than ever, and anyone can do it. You don't really have to necessarily be famous or anything to stand out anymore with social media and with ways to publish online, with blogs, with the speaking opportunities, whatever you can really get your hands on to get yourself out there. It's more powerful than we realize, I think.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Leah Gervais. She is the bloggist for Urban 20-something, and we're talking about freelancing. We're talking about side hustles. And even though you're telling us about this right now, you have some free resources that are available for people to go to this website. And if you're driving, you don't have to take a pen out. You can go back to the podcast notes. We'll have the link for you there. But I see productivity power resources. I see the beginner's freelance guide, the side hustlers resource library. So these all look like great places to go if this is the first time you're hearing about these types of things. Tell me a little bit more about, now you mentioned you went on this trip to Cambodia and you've written about different tricks you can do for travel and budgeting. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I started this blog, like I said, last year when I was declining law school, and it sort of just documented the last year of me trying to figure out the unconventional path I was going to take, because I really had thought for so many years that I was going to go to law school. That's such a clear, defined, you're going to be in school for 3 years, you kind of know what you're going to do after. And so when I kind of went with my gut and declined them, I didn't really know what I was going to do instead. And so this blog has sort of been the place that I've talked about quitting my job and what I did right and what I did wrong there. And then I did go to travel in Asia. And that was sort of for a couple of reasons. I guess once I declined law school and was working at a law firm, I just didn't see the point. It seemed like I knew I wasn't going to do this anymore. So I decided to go somewhere where I could sort of figure out what I wanted to do that didn't have the price of living that Manhattan does. So I went to Cambodia, but I also really wanted to travel alone at the time. I wanted to travel alone in my 20s. I thought that was really important. I also wanted to live alone, which I can't afford to do in Manhattan. So I went to Asia and volunteered, and that's where I learned how to freelance, basically, because I had to make money somehow. And I have kept doing that as I've come back.
I love it. I have clients on both coasts of the U.S. If you're a local listener and you're here in Houston, our rent levels are pretty good compared to the rest of the country. But when you talk about California, when you talk about New York, specifically Manhattan, the rent rates are crazy expensive there. So going from Manhattan to Cambodia, that definitely sounds like a big difference there. Some of the tips that you've written about here on packing for when you do travel, there's a checklist you have here, the minimalist checklist. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that isn't really just for traveling. I think a good way to try to save money and look inside of, to figure out what you want to do is to get rid of things in your life that you don't need. That's what I did when I went to Asia, because I only went with a backpack on my back and I didn't really have any suitcases or anything. And I think that it's a powerful thing when you're trying to sort of flesh out your life, to flesh out the things you don't need.
And in turn, does that end up saving money by not having to take a bunch of baggage, literally and metaphorically baggage with you?
Yes, it does. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to pay to, get it around, and just easier to live that way.
Well, I know most of the airlines are seeking different profit centers, and you get trapped when you take those additional bags on there, and they'll charge you more. So that sounds like a good way to be able to cut down on expenses. What other things can you tell listeners that you discovered while you were traveling that you'd like to share?
I just really recommend traveling by yourself at least once. I think it's a great way to get to know yourself more, and I think it's, in a way, the best way to travel, because you're just really doing things that you want to do on your time when you want. It's guilt-free, and it's a great way to build a relationship with yourself, which we so often put to the side, even though it's the most important thing to build. And I think even if you're in a relationship or you have a family, I know it's harder to travel alone, but I still think that it's doable, and I highly recommend it to everyone at least once.
That's good advice. It is. A lot of times when you have a big family, you'll do the family trips, but it may not be the case that you're traveling on your own. And I imagine it's a completely different experience. If you're bringing 4 or 5 people with you, you're definitely having to bring more than a backpack, I think. But,
right. That's definitely true.
So the freedom of being able to just get up and go and do that sounds really good. Now, specifically, you've written about traveling internationally on a budget, or not necessarily on a budget, but for low cost. What are some practical tips you might be able to share with listeners?
Yeah, so this also goes back to my sort of budget mentality. I know, first of all, I probably would make a lot of personal finance experts squirm when I say that I don't have a budget and I don't believe in it. I also really only use credit cards. I don't use cash, which I know is another sort of personal finance no-no for a lot of people. But I think that travel benefits you can get with credit cards, in particular the sign-up bonuses you can get with credit cards, are incredible. And that is how I was able to do this trip at a young age, because when I was in college, I took out several airline credit cards specifically to get the sort of sign-up bonuses and save up frequent flyer miles. And in college, in a weird way, I had a little more money than I did when I graduated, just because I either was living off of loans or my parents were helping me a little bit more. So I was able to get those minimum spending limits and get those miles racked up. And that was one of the smarter things I did in college, because those airline sign-up bonuses are amazing.
So definitely I have mixed feelings on this one, but it's okay. When you said credit cards, the hair on the back of my neck stood up there, but that's okay. The idea of getting those frequent flyer miles, and I'm looking on your blog here and it's saying, pay your rent, pretty much pay everything to the credit cards. I think the key to that is discipline, and making sure that if you're going to do that, and you're basically leveraging those sign-up bonuses, those frequent flyer miles. And I have heard that you can really, really, win when it comes to that, but you have to have that discipline to make sure that you pay those credit cards off frequently, or else you're paying the interest on top of that. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, whatever it takes to make sure you're paying your credit cards off in full. I'm very, very fortunate that my parents sort of drilled into my head at a young age that, credit card debt is not an option. I didn't know what it meant to be in credit card debt, but I knew it was really bad. So whatever system I think people can figure out for themselves, whether it's, when you charge something on your credit card, you can take the cash and go put it in a drawer so that you physically know you're going to have it at the end of the month. Whatever you need to do there's also, ways you can set up notifications on your phone if you spend over a certain amount. There's a lot of ways to hold yourself accountable for it, but it also does come back down to discipline, like you're saying.
Well, I love it. Good stuff, Leah. We are right here towards the end of the show. What else did I forget to ask you that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I just want to say this is something I struggle with in my life, but I talk a lot about the benefits millennials have, and I super believe in that. I love being a millennial, and I'm really proud of it. But I think one of the more dangerous things going on with our generation is this compliance and acceptance of debt. And I think we just think that because so many people have it, especially student debt and mortgages, which are, in the eyes of our credit reports, not bad debt, it's too easy for us to think that they're good debt. And I'm glad that I sort of saw that at a younger age, but I still wish I had seen it sooner. And so I just hope that we can start talking about more. Just because something isn't bad debt in the eyes of your credit report doesn't mean it's not a bad thing.
Excellent. Those are words to live by there. Thank you so much, Leah, for joining us. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. You too.
And you have been listening to KPFT Houston.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.